Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for the opportunity we have to come today and talk about some of the things that are going on in the world and discuss how they fit into our framework for Bible prophecy and things that we know that are coming, and how we see the stage being set for things that you have prophesied in your word. We pray that you will bless our time together. Always help us to keep in mind that we have tremendous hope if we are believers in Jesus Christ, and how this all works out for us in the end. And we pray that you will help us to stand firm in an evil time and to be willing to share the hope that we have with others around us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Middle East. Eventually, when I get to it, I will talk about it today. I apologize for not doing a midweek update. I had some other things I had to do, and it does take a tremendous amount of time because I have to get the recording set up, I have to edit it, and it's not, a 1 hour update. If I ever did a 1 hour update, right? It takes several times that long to edit it, get all the slides ready, many more hours than just an hour and a half. So other things came up this week, and I thought, well, I'll just leave it for Sunday and try to cram it in again, which doesn't seem to be working very well. So today I will talk about the Middle East, and I'll just sort of title that The Drone Arrangers, because this asymmetrical warfare thing that we have going on is very different than almost any time in human history. Well, it's really different than any time in human history because of the flow of information and the weaponry and the ability of small powers to project a lot of power. And I think this has some prophetic significance to it. Here are some of the other platforms that we're on: Fellowship Bible YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, Remnant Truth Network, and Rumble, Real FBC. Rumble takes a little while to get up on Sunday. It's not the fastest network. I mean, YouTube still is the gold standard, but of course we have to be respectful. I did preach first hour today on the sign of the prophet Jonah, the rejection of the sign of the prophet Jonah. You might want to listen to that. I'll repeat a little bit of what I said there. We live at this time, though, where there's this crazy convergence of all of these things that are going on. It's happening very quickly. This is sort of the framework that I use based on some of the scriptures. We have Ezekiel 38 and 39. We also have the conditions, I think, of the Psalm 83 that we see sort of forming in our world right now, which I think is significant. And we'll see how that goes. And there's just a lot happening on that every week, it seems like. There's a convergence. Everything is happening at the same time. We also have to keep in mind the logistics, that some of these things have to have a foundation built. And we talked a couple weeks ago about one person's view of the Temple Mount and how that could be turned into a house of prayer for all nations, which was really kind of stunning and interesting. But there are people within Israel that are talking about it too, and I think that that's critical. And then as we get closer to the end times, we will have understanding. Now, I'm going to start off with, back in 2017, I was at a conference in England. I think you can probably still find the video. The title of my talk was called The Silence of the Shepherds. Because, as I said, first hour, my view is that the wolf in sheep's clothing that we're warned about is not a wolf with a sheepskin. It's a wolf that looks like a shepherd. This is how I understand the passage. And that's why it deceives the sheep. That's why the sheep are warned, watch out for wolves in sheep's clothing. That's what Paul warned the Ephesian elders when he met with them. And so I played a clip of Andy Stanley from many years ago where he was kind of taking a shot at the Old Testament. That's Old Testament stuff. It's not that important. We're in the New Testament. And this was one of I don't know how else to say it. This was one of the early heresies of the early church, that the Old Testament had nothing to do with the church. It was all new and it needed to be replaced. But you could not understand the things that happened with Jesus and his life and sacrifice and feast days and all this thing without understanding that Old Testament and how things were structured. And so in a talk a number of years ago, Andy Stanley, in this talk, A Silence of the Shepherds, I focused on a lot of things that Andy had said, including one where he says it doesn't really matter whether you believe Jesus is the Messiah or the Son of God. It's just if you believe in Jesus and you follow him, you'll have a better life. Now, that's very troubling. And his belief important, we talked about that first hour. And here's a video. This is last Sunday, a sermon titled Paper Walls at North Point Church. And listen, this is what happened when the worship band came out. The pastor.
Taylor. Unbelievable. And just so you know, Chris was homeschooled. So that'll teach you. You can be seated for just a minute. Unbelievable. Yes, I saw those grins. Pamela Holiday, I think you were the first person. Was Pamela? Who was over here that stood up first? Right here on the corner. Was that you that stood up first? You just couldn't help yourself. Yes. It was the call to worship. So why did we do that? Here's why we did that. Because we have to let the band get things out of their system every once in a while just so they'll play the songs we need them to play. Oh my goodness. You know, so when I watched the rehearsal and they sent me this stuff ahead of time, it just reminded me that, you know, for some of you, that was a reminder of a season of life. I can see some of the guys my age kind of looking like, oh my gosh, they're just thinking of high school. Some of you it reminds you of your parents' season of life, you know, or your grandparents, or it might have reminded you of a Cadillac commercial. Anybody like, oh yeah, I heard that, the Cadillac commercial. I have no idea who's saying that, right? But you know what it reminds all of us of? It reminds us that time just moves on, right? And if we're lucky, we get to get older. But if we're intentional, we get to get wiser. And the thing.
Now, listen, this is trouble. This passes for worship in large chunks of the evangelical church. I'm going to play a clip also of someone who is sort of high on my irritant meter, who's Russell Moore, formerly of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Now works, I think he's the editor at Christianity Today. So he was interviewed by the Washington Post a while back. And of course, the subject of what happened a year ago at the nation's capital came up. So I just want you to listen to this. And then we'll point out some of the inconsistencies in it. If you can, now be careful, the hypocrisy is going to be like a tsunami, man. I've just warned you ahead of time. So here's the interview with Russell Moore. I think this happened last July, but this is what he said.
Well, it's great to have you. We were living in challenging times, and I wanted to start by asking you about vaccine hesitancy among white evangelicals, where I believe about a quarter say they're hesitant and won't get the vaccine. Can you tell me what's fueling that hesitance?
Well, I think there are a lot of people in the secular world who assume that the hesitancy is coming from theological distinctives to evangelical Christianity. And there are some people who will say things along the lines of, God will protect me, I don't need a vaccine. Mostly, though, that's in the prosperity gospel, health and wealth form of Pentecostalism, in my experience. Much more so, what's going on in your typical evangelical church is the same thing that you will find in some other sectors of American life, which is sorting through misinformation, trying to figure out what's true and what's false. And I hear from pastors often who are saying, I'm trying to encourage my people to be vaccinated, showing them all the things that we can do together if we are, but There's a great deal of misinformation that comes through on social media feeds and sometimes cable news networks, and that simply is much more time in the week than an hour or 2 hours on Sunday.
You've said several times, you've mentioned misinformation, and I'm curious about how the church is responding to the spread of QAnon and other conspiracy theories. What's the role here of the church in your view?
Well, it's not so much QAnon as a formal movement. Very rarely do I hear people who will say, I'm a supporter of QAnon, but often they will pick up conspiracy theories that are being spread by QAnon and similar groups and don't even know where this is coming from. And this is a great concern, not only to pastors, but one of the things that I find myself dealing with often now are young evangelicals who are saying, help me know how to talk to my parents. They might say that their parents have become involved in some of these conspiracy theories and they're worried about them and want to know how to connect with them. Well, that's almost the mirror image of the conversations I would have been having 10 years ago when parents would be saying, help me to know how to talk and connect to my children. And so that's a great concern, and it seems the possibilities are only that it could get worse. So we need to be ready for this.
So that makes me think back to January the 6th and the fact that some of those people raiding the Capitol building said they were answering the call of God. What do you make of that? How should we be responding to that?
Well, I think I was as angry as I've ever been when I watched the insurrection against our country, our Capitol building, with some signs using Christian symbols and Christian language, Jesus saves and so forth, which is, of course, completely contrary to the message of Scripture, to the message of...
Okay, now, do you see the hypocrisy here? I was as angry as I've ever been when I saw attack on my country. So it's okay for Russell Moore to be upset with what he views as an attack on his country, but nobody else can, because he has the received wisdom of God, I guess. Do you understand why this man is a major irritant to me? He says stuff like that. It's what the emergents used to say. That's your truth. There's no absolute truth, they would say. Remember that? And I'm like, do you believe that absolutely? It's sophistry is what it is. And we can disagree about what happened that day. And there'll be court cases that, there were some charges filed this week. And there'll be court cases to sort all that out. And I hope it all comes out. There's 15,000 hours of video that have not been released, even to defendants in these cases. And I know this for a fact. And this is egregious conduct on the part of our government. It's awful. Now, there were awful things that happened that day, but what I want you to keep in mind, though, as we go through this is what I've been talking about. There's this narrative, this constant giving you this certain way of thinking. And anything contrary is evil, it's dangerous. I saw a guy on MSNBC this week. I know I watch it. I know I shouldn't, but it's sort of like when you see a car wreck on the road, you have to slow down and look because everybody else is. But he said the Republican Party is just a front for white terrorists and white supremacists. This is terrible. But people who say that, they get jobs at these networks. It's unbelievable. But it's the narrative that we need to watch out. And so you're going to see these things. Everybody's talking about the world in 2022. And there's this narrative, but at the same time, we know that in the end times there will be lawlessness. Look at this picture. This is Union Pacific Railroad yards in Railroad in downtown Los Angeles, California. What they did was they broke locks on shipping containers and broke open the packages. And this goes for hundreds of yards along the tracks. And we know that what's happened is, it's unbelievable. I mean, I even saw some videos where they zoomed in on it. You can see the address label. So Union Pacific wrote a letter to the prosecutor in Los Angeles County, this guy named George Garcon. Soros funded, believes in no bail. So people are arrested. So Union Pacific says, here's a quote here down at the bottom, 90 containers. And these are truck, you see them on the back of trucks, one or two. 90 are compromised every day in Los Angeles. In partnership with the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department, we estimate over 100 arrests have been made of active criminals vandalizing them. Union Pacific alone making several dozens of arrests. They have a police force. With our law enforcement partners, we have deterred hundreds of individuals from trespassing. But of all those arrests, however, Union Pacific has not been contacted for any court proceedings started by you, Mr. Prosecutor. What are you doing? And the answer is they're tearing down the system. There was just a big change to sentencing guidelines up in Minnesota that was proposed, and they asked for comment, and there were hundreds and hundreds of comments opposing these guidelines, which will allow violent criminals out of jail almost immediately. And there were, I think, 30 some in favor. Go to Powerline blog and read about that. And the people on the Sentencing Commission, they're just shocked that people would oppose what they're doing. Because we're acting on behalf of God and utopia and right and freedom. And they completely define all the words. So you see all these things, this lawlessness, this Romans 1 mindset. I think I might have mentioned this last week. Here's a picture of the Amy Schneider, who has won the most consecutive Jeopardy games of any female contestant. Show me her DNA. Because she identifies as a female. In Washington, the state of Washington, there have been protests about a series of laws that are coming into place in Washington to revise certain sections of the code with regard to children. There are several sections. I'll just show you this first one. So what it says, health carriers and insurers shall adopt policies and procedures that conform administrative, business, and operational practices to protect an enrollees, that's someone who, like, you work a job, you get health insurance, you're the enrollee, and protected individuals who are identified as minors that are covered under your work policy. They're protecting the protected individual's right to privacy or right to confidential healthcare services granted under state or federal laws. And what are those services? And look at what a healthcare insurance company is not allowed to do. You may not require protected individuals to obtain the policyholder, primary subscriber, or other covered person's authorization to receive health care or to submit a claim if the protected individual has the right to consent to care. The health carrier must recognize the right of a protected individual or enrollee to exclusively exercise rights granted under this section regarding health information related to the care that the enrollee or protected individual has received. And what could that care possibly be? Sex change. Hormone blockers before they've entered puberty. In many parts of the world, this is considered child abuse. The legislature of Washington has enshrined it into law. Romans chapter 1, God will give them over to a reprobate mind, meaning they will lose the ability to reason. And the examples of that we see in our world and culture today are legion. It is a judgment of God that has come upon them. The other narrative you're going to see a lot, and this is from a couple weeks ago in the Sunday Review section of the New York Times. It's called, the title of it is The Disaster Atlas. And it goes on the whole section, A World on Fire. And the pictures they use. So my question is, it's an emergency. It's terrible. Just ask why Prince Charles. Our children are judging us. Hey, Charles, go deal with your brother. He's got plenty of problems. He's kicked out of the royal family this week, stripped of everything. And he's entitled to his day in court, so he'll go to trial. But everything is global warming. It's the narrative. And listen, if they're locking everything down over this thing, are they going to lock it down over a climate emergency? What do you think they're going to do? They're going to use it. I went through one of the exercises that they have. Now, I haven't seen all the press this morning. I got up early, but I had a message to finish preparing. This is the South Pacific, Tonga, near Tonga, east of Australia, way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And it was captured on satellite. I love high definition and satellite images. This is an underwater earthquake went off. Looks like a nuclear bomb, doesn't it? They had tsunami hit Tonga. They even had a couple foot of waves that hit Southern California. They closed a lot of beaches. Of course, I was conversing with somebody on social media last night about it. I'm sure that there's going to be a bunch of people grab their surfboard and run to the beach. And there were tons of surfers out there in Southern California catching the wave. Now, are they going to blame this on global warming? There are about 8 active volcanoes in the world right now. They put out more carbon than all of humanity. By the way, this is something that's not very talked about going on. This is from the Financial Times last week. Crypto cannot easily be painted green. What's up with that? Well, crypto requires computers. Computers run on angel's wings, I think, right? No, they run on electricity. Do you know that there are many countries in the world whose power needs combined are outstripped by a great deal by the power that's used to run these crypto farms, server farms. And it just continues to grow. I think you saw the news this week out in New Albany where there's already billions of dollars being spent on server farms. They're going to build even more out there. So we have this thing we talked about last week. Macron is saying we're going to make it uncomfortable for you. And if you're not getting the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er, we don't even consider you a citizen. And even the New York Times says he used very vulgar language to talk about the people who've not received the treatment for Charlie Vector 019er. And then Prime Minister Trudeau also talked about it and just said everybody who doesn't do that is misogynistic and racist. And the leader here's from the national newspaper in the United Arab Emirates today. Canada looks for ways to pressure those who have not received the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er. Quebec plans to impose tax on people who do not want that as the country battles Omicron wave. Djokovic, who I talked about last week in this really rather nasty editorial cartoon from I can't remember what paper that was from, but he got deported again this week because he had not told the truth on his entry visa. He won a court case, but then they took him back to court, and he's been deported now. Can't compete in the that came out of the Washington Post. That was in the Washington Post. I don't think it was their editorial cartoonist, who, if it's the one guy I'm thinking of at Washington Post, that's not even lunatic enough for him, that editorial cartoon. But they're trying to put this in. This is out of the National Post. Federal health minister in Canada sees mandatory state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er on the horizon. The Spectator was correct. I mean, the article that they had that I referenced last week, rip up these passports. They're awful. They're totalitarian. Washington, D.C. just put them in place. New York City. Other cities in our country are doing it. In fact, I saw an article someplace. I might come to it later. I apologize if this is out of order, but it just said that, look, it's here in the United States. Here, let me exit out of this and I can find it quickly. Before I get to that, this is one that's kind of heart of a genetically altered pig is transplanted into a human. Now, all the articles that talked about it were like, they didn't think this was good. Why? Because we shouldn't be doing this, maybe? No, because the recipient wasn't worthy. He had been convicted of an assault many years ago, so he wasn't worthy to receive this treatment. And you're going to see what Ezekiel Emanuel talked about under Obamacare when it was coming in. Look it up. The panels, they're happening right now. So here's a report from Go Get Doc. Your free, secured, verified digital passport. In 3 easy steps, you can get secure digital record that you can use for travel, live shows, and employers everywhere. Get a free passport. And this is where we advertise. And here's the first page of the thing. Messages to end are encrypted. So, of course, they're going to protect all of your healthcare information. Thank you for choosing VaxYes, the easiest way to save and use your record for your state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er from your phone. Let's get started. And I'm sort of like, and then, so I clicked on it. Amy showed up, my personal secure assistant. And then I stopped. Clear is also doing this. Some of you may use Clear if you travel a lot to get through the lines at the airport. And what's it say? Come back better with Clear Health Pass. So they moved over into that. And so we have this, so this is the requirement that's happening. This was in a Daily Record in Scotland. Australians are being detained in COVID internment camps for 14 days. If they test positive or are suspected positive, should we follow their lead? Should Scotland do this? I don't know what happened, but if you go there now, you won't find the page. It's gone. So before I get to more of the narrative, I will talk about this. China. This is current analysis of global grain stocks, maize, rice, wheat, and soybeans. On the left is the percentage. This is the percentage held by China. So you see maize down a little, but they still hold about 69% of the world's corn stock. Maize, what you call corn. Remember that commercial? Rice, 60%, 50% of wheat, and 37% of soybeans. Held by China. Is that good news? Does that indicate problems? China has a number of problems. This is a report from the South China Morning Post about the demographic problem of China. I don't know if this is...
The world's most populous country. According to a 2020 census, China is home to 1.41 billion people. But population experts say the number of working age people in China is now shrinking at a rapid rate, and that the nation needs to fix the problem fast. When the Communist Party won control of China in 1949, overpopulation was not a major concern. Chairman Mao Zedong said, "Even if China's population multiplies many times, she is fully capable of finding a solution. The solution is production." But nearly 2 decades later, China was facing an overpopulation crisis. The nation's fertility rate reached 6.18 births per woman in 1968. By 1973, there were 882 million people in the country. That's when authorities first decided to start encouraging people to have fewer children. Education campaigns promoted late marriage and fewer births. But in 1979, that encouragement became the law of the land. Under the leadership of China's second paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, China implemented a one-child policy aimed at slashing the country's birth rate. A nationwide propaganda campaign featured banners that appealed to patriotism, with phrases such as "fewer and better births, a service to the nation." Others warned, "Sound the alarm about population growth and stay vigilant." The one-child policy was strictly enforced in cities. Families who had more than one child were punished with severe fines, and their additional children were often denied access to public education and healthcare. Civil servants who violated the policy lost their jobs. Some local governments went as far as carrying out forced abortions and sterilizations of women. But the one-child policy worked. Births per woman went from 2.74 in 1979 to 1.6 in 2005. The pendulum, however, had swung too far in the opposite direction. Demographic experts say a fertility rate of less than 2.1 births per woman would leave China in a situation where there are too many elderly people and not enough younger ones to take over their jobs or care for them. Among those experts...
So do you think that could cause supply chain problems? In addition to that, right now, there's an outbreak of COVID across China. Now, they are giving numbers. There might even be some other stuff's breaking out. I haven't been able to confirm that independently yet. It's hard to get information out of China. But they've locked down major cities. Xi'an in north central China. One of the start of the ancient Silk Road of China shut down. 13 million people. 50% larger than New York City. Other cities, Shenzhen, 14 million. Tianjin, just this morning. Shenzhen, 14 million. That's 3 and 4 times the size of Los Angeles. And they're major ports. So I'm just telling you that I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I'm just telling you that there are problems that are going to take a while to work out, if they work out. So the narrative, this was announced by Attorney General Merrick Garland. Thank goodness that he did not Justice Department forms a unit to fight domestic terror, special unit. They had a discussion about this at the University of Chicago in a Zoom call. Here is the former number 2 at the FBI, who was himself charged with inappropriate conduct at best. Of course, when the administration changed, what happened? He gets his full pension. And then he gets on this Zoom call and he talks about the events at the Capitol in early January of 2021. And one of the things that he says, and this is from this article in the Federalist, conservatives are in the same category as Islamic terrorists. Now, I think that's probably hard to believe, right? Here's what he said.
Yeah, I can tell you from my perspective of spending a lot of time focused on the radicalization of international terrorists and Islamic extremists and extremists of all stripes, what we are seeing and what Professor Pape's research makes clear is that this group shares many of the same characteristics of those groups that we've seen radicalized along entirely different ideological lines. I can tell you that in 2014, as we were watching the rise of the caliphate in Syria, we were watching this incredibly high quality propaganda being pushed out in new and aggressive ways over social media and being used to recruit adherents across the globe and to attract people to come to Syria to fight on behalf of the Islamic State for all kinds of different reasons. They had different pitches and different groups of propaganda directed at different people. What we saw, those who were drawn to this radicalization, eventually we pulled together, tried to kind of combine a look across all of our cases, the subjects of all of our investigations who were folks who were attempting to or had traveled to Syria. And what we saw was America. It wasn't what we expected to see. It wasn't just young males, unemployed, uneducated, recent converts, disenfranchised, alienated guys who spent their time in the basement looking at, propaganda on the internet. It was doctors and lawyers and people from the suburbs, and it was black, white, and every shade of brown. It was people who were...
Do you understand what he's saying? You see what he did? The pivot that he made right in the middle there? Well, we looking at this Islamic, and we saw America. This is the former number 2 at the FBI. The narrative's running rampant. Here he says that parents at school board meetings pose a threat to national security.
Just make a note. This really reflects back to your very first student question. I think it was Sonia who asked, how do the events on January 6th kind of play out and impact how things are happening across the country? And this shows you, right? It's that basic lie, the falsehood of the stolen election, that central grievance that really fueled the fire on January 6th has been dispatched in a way across the country. And it is that lie that politicians at the state level and the local level are using that lie in order to justify exactly these sorts of legislative changes that are politicizing the voting process and ultimately denying Americans the access to vote, which is, you can't think of anything worse for the future of a democracy.
So a solution is more surveillance.
There are basic assumptions that underlie your analytical judgments. You take raw intelligence, you put it in front of your best analysts, and they come up with assessments.
Or fake dossiers. He knows about those too.
That's how we arm our leadership, right, to make decisions. And if those basic assumptions were that we're looking for kind of traditional domestic threats, okay, is the Klan coming? Are the Proud Boys coming? Are the 3%ers coming? Or is Antifa coming? And not seeing that clearly, they may have been looking in the wrong direction. It's those very fundamental assumptions about what constitutes a threat that I think could be the most impactful.
Okay, I can't stand it anymore of that. So listen, back in January or July of last year, This tweet appeared from the FBI. Family members and peers are often best positioned to witness signs of mobilization to violence because they were coming out with a report, something to control the narrative about these people. Now, it's interesting because you heard McCabe say, well, when we were investigating ISIS, we saw America. And this is exactly what the FBI believes now. Look at the images. Do you see the plane back there and the towers? See somebody on the computer? Listen, these images, this is images from an FBI report from 2019 called Mobilization Indicators, Homegrown Violent Extremists. So look at the pages there. These are the images that they're now saying apply to people who go to school board meetings and complain, or some of whom got out of hand at the Capitol. By the way, did Joe Biden still become president? Was anything successful that day? It probably hurt the people that opposed it. But anyway, and so this is from that thing. Look, preparing to travel to fight with or support terrorist groups. But now the FBI takes that, and it's like domestic, homegrown violent extremism. Watch your neighbor lawyer, your neighbor doctor, your neighbor school teacher, your neighbor person who disagrees with the government. Do you understand? I'm trying to tell you this is extremely serious stuff. And I know you get it. It's just so frustrating. And they're trying to control information. Some of you know Joe Rogan. A group of doctors came out this week. He's the most popular podcaster on planet Earth. Then an interview with a doctor went viral. YouTube took it down. It's got millions and millions of views. He's got millions of followers. So this group of doctors went to Spotify, his main podcast outlet, and said he is a menace to public health. Doctors demand Spotify puts an end to COVID lies on the Joe Rogan Experience. Saw a report of a doctor in Maine. Now, I don't know the whole story. I'm just going to tell you what I know about it. He was prescribing certain medications in response to Charlie Vector. His license is now suspended, and he's been ordered to undergo psychological counseling. That is in Maine today. Go look it up. Fact. And the counseling is because, well, you know, he might have a trouble with drugs or alcohol. That's why he's doing this. I'm telling you, folks, we're in deep problems. You heard about this thing yesterday? A synagogue held hostage. Guy took over. You can guess which religion he follows. Took a synagogue over. A Jewish synagogue. And he was killed when they finally got control of the situation, and the hostages were freed. So here we go, the FBI. The FBI today, they come out because this just happened. Body's not even cold yet. Hostage taker was not focused on the Jewish community. The FBI says the man who held hostages for hours inside a Texas synagogue was specifically focused on an issue not directly connected to the Jewish community. Now listen. There are ranches in Texas that have a lot of what the FBI is putting out in that tweet. I think you know what I mean. Remember this, but this is the way the narrative happens. Remember President Obama interviewed by Vox after the attack on the hypermarket, a Jewish store in Paris? And Obama said this. He said it was a random act. It is entirely legitimate for American people to be deeply concerned when you got a bunch of violent, vicious zealots who behead people or randomly shoot a bunch of folks in a deli in Paris. That's not what happened. Remember the prior reiteration of the press secretary We now have Cruella von Zuckerberger, Pisackyburger, whatever. And I don't know if these people come from central casting because Jen says something and you go, Pisaki. I mean, that's just not, it's Pisaki. Well, the prior in the Obama administration, remember we had a guy named Josh Earnest. And my nickname for him was Joshing Earnestly, because that's what he had. Here was when he was questioned about the president's comments, Obama's.
Asking about his description of the shooting at the kosher deli in Paris as being randomly shoot a bunch of folks in a deli of Paris. I mean, this was not a random shooting of a bunch of folks in a deli in Paris. This was an attack on a kosher deli. Does the president have any doubt that those terrorists attacked that deli because there would be Jews in that deli?
Well, John, it is clear from the terrorists and some of the writings that they put out afterwards what their motivation was. The adverb that the president chose was used to indicate that the individuals who were killed in that terrible, tragic incident were killed not because of who they were, but because of where they randomly happened to be.
They weren't killed because they were in a Jewish deli, though? They were in a kosher
John,
deli?
These individuals were not targeted by name. This is the point.
Not by name, but by religion, were they not?
Well, John, there were people other than just Jews who were in that deli.
Is there any doubt that deli was attacked because it was a kosher deli? This was
No,
not
John.
any random deli.
No, John.
This was a kosher deli.
I answered the question once. No.
Remember what I said is that guy would flatline any. I used to work for a polygraph expert in grad school, and he would flatline that thing. He would. I mean, they wouldn't even get a bump. And I suspect that they've got someone who's like that. So here's CARE coming out. National director said, we strongly condemn. They don't agree with the FBI. We strongly condemn the hostage taking at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. The latest anti-Semitic attack at a house of worship is unacceptable act of evil. Now, I think that's CARE covering their backside, to be honest with you. This is a recent CARE report. These are the extremist groups, Islamophobic groups that got money. American Freedom Law Center. The prior page was American Center for Law and Justice. CAMERA, the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting. Christian Broadcasting Network, Clarion Project, David Horowitz Freedom Center, Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Investigative Project on Terrorism, Middle East Forum, and Middle East Media Research Institute. Okay, so here's the rule of thumb. Those are all places that you can go and get wonderful information. Okay? So follow those. So if CARE is attacking them, then those are who you should follow. But this thing about disinformation, Sweden has now set up an agency to counter foreign disinformation. And we see a lot of this going on with the Ukraine-Russia thing. I won't go into too much of it. I do have another part of my presentation. But the disinformation is already starting for the 2024 campaign. Look at this. This is from the Sunday Times in the UK. Mayor Pete ready to ride to the rescue as Democrats head for the buffers. That'll scare Putin. Over half of Europe could be infected soon. This thing's really running rampant. I mean, it's impossible to find somebody who doesn't know somebody who's got Charlie Vector now of any different strains. And I have a lot of friends that I know, people in the hospital suffering, people recovering. This is not something to be dismissive of. It is an issue. Here's from the Financial Times the other day. PSYOPs are a crucial weapon in the war against disinformation. So in modern warfare, what are they saying? You have to control the narrative. That's a big deal. So when you look through the reports that I've cited you from INSS in Israel and other reports that talk about a coming Middle East war, or you look at things from the Institute for Study of War that talk a lot about Russia and Syria, and particularly Russia and Ukraine. One of the things they talk about is we're in an age of asymmetric warfare, and one of the asymmetric issues is controlling information, control the narrative. So you need to understand, in other words, propaganda. So you just need to really have your filters on high to be able to sort through these things. So this is a Swedish report where they come out with the committee that they set up, and it's titled on the right, psychological defense. Do you see what it is? This is our mission. We're psychologically defending people, because people can get misled. Except, not everybody could be misled. Andrew McCabe cannot be misled. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, the squad, they cannot be misled. Joe Biden can't be misled. So here's the report. This was what I was going to cite earlier. Quietly and over some objections, a national digital vaccine card has emerged. That's the story from NBC News. That's a U.S. story. It's here. And it's being rolled out. Let me see. So China's shutting down, Hong Kong's shutting down because of the zero COVID policy. Their ports, their economy, they've taken away all the democratic freedom newspapers and that type of thing. China's really ramping down, and now they're closing down major cities, such as these ports. That's Jian on the right. That's where they have those terracotta warriors that they found a number of years ago. Great preservation of history, but massive ports are being shut down. It's a problem, and it's going to cause supply chain issues. You violate protocol in China, you go to jail. Now, you might have thought I was talking about Australia there, or Quebec, or other parts of Canada. So here's a narrative thing that's coming. Starts tomorrow. The Davos conference, it's going to be virtual this year. You can probably go to World Economic Forum, weforum.org, or .com, I think it's .org, and watch the sessions. They go all week this week, the virtual sessions. And so here's our guest updater this week, this columnist in the the Financial Times in the UK, said, don't deride the Davos prophets of doom. They might actually be talking. So, I mean, listen, if you think I'm negative Nelly, at least I don't put out these slick PDFs. I show you these slick PDFs. So here's the new 2022 report, Global Risk. This is from the people at Davos. Global Risk 2022, Worlds Apart. Disorderly climate transition. We have climate problems, but getting to green is really going to be disruptive. And I agree with that. Look at this, digital dependencies and cyber vulnerabilities. And they talk about cyber attacks that are coming. And I think they're correct. A lot of bad actors in the world. Here's another one that they see. This sounds like it's Soros funded. Barriers to migration. Oh, can't have those. Crowding and competition in space. Well, this kind of cracks me up. So it's a very small, teeny, weeny, tiny part of space. You know, we're men, we kind of get these outside egos. We're going to run everything. We're going to control everything. We're going to make things better. But, you know, what man has been able to harness in space is this little, I mean, it wouldn't even be a grain of sand on the ocean, the beaches of all the oceans of the world. That's my opinion. I mean, God made this unbelievable universe. We'll make another one. Refreshing resilience. So look at some of the topics they're going to cover. Time to shift to net zero emission plastics. Virtual reality on the lower right. Treatment for Charlie Vector 019er. Embrace artificial intelligence. These are some of the topics that you can go and watch this week. I watch it, you know. Here's Melanie Phillips. She has an interesting article. This kind of relates to the lawless thing. So what happened in England last year was some people went to, in Colston, they went to, I think, a university, and they found a statue of someone who is now not politically correct. They were filmed tearing it down, dragging it down, and throwing it in the river. I think they threw red paint on it, too. So they had a jury trial this week. They were found not guilty. And Melanie is a little bit, she called it a perverse jury verdict, perverse jury verdicts, because there's been a number of other of these cases. Now, in the United States, we have this thing, concept called jury nullification. It's rarely used, but it's becoming very, very used because, well, we don't like that law, and our motives were pure to destroy the statue, so you can't convict us. And now we're at the point where they probably wouldn't even be charged today. Troubling. This is another troubling story from City Journal. I showed you the video of the Indiana insurance guy last week who said that their death claims are up. Look at this. United States now averages 275 drug-related deaths per day, largely from synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl. And so the whole system's breaking down. Look, and so what they found, though, is that it's largely a male problem. You see the increase in drug-related deaths on the left, and on the right, it looks like marital status. And so what they're finding, so you see the yellow line going way up, that is males, drug-related deaths increasing, largely single, young adult males. This is a big problem. Here's another chart. Prime age male drug-related deaths per 100,000. And you see if you're single or divorced, your drug-related deaths have really skyrocketed. In both communities, white, much worse than African-American communities. Married, it's gone up a little bit, but not too much. And then this is 2010 to 2020. And it shows education things. And so the City Journal article says, any discussion of opioid deaths then should focus on the unique perils of the unattached male. Some scholars have indeed pointed out the trend. And it's a problem. There's another one. This is from Wall Street Journal yesterday. Tech giants are starting to control over half of the fiber optic cables around the world. We always talk about the internet. Well, what is the internet? Well, it's phone lines, it's cables, and who put them in place? Well, now the tech companies have so much, they're going to control over 50% of fiber optics. How do you think that's going to go when those guys are controlling who gets to access the fiber optic cable? Big trouble. Okay, I'm going to close this one and open my other one. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so here's the geopolitics. And let's jump into this. Well, I need to talk about the Supreme Court case, the vaccine mandates. Rats. It was in my other presentation. I'll just tell you what happened. So the Supreme Court had oral arguments last week. They issued a decision on the vaccine mandates, and came down Thursday or Friday. And so on the OSHA rule, OSHA put out a rule, said 100 or more employees, you have to require state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019 or weekly testing. And then also mask. That was struck down as, the court stayed any enforcement of that and sent it back to the lower court for more proceedings. So it's not over yet, but they just said the federal government, you're not going to win this one. But that doesn't mean the federal government's not going to try. I'm just telling you that's what the Biden administration wants to do. The other was a mandate for healthcare workers in facilities that receive Medicare, Medicaid funds, which is like every medical facility on the planet. The healthcare workers have to have received the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er. There's a significant percentage that refuse it. They're getting fired all over the place. And private employers can do what they want, by the way, even without the OSHA rule. Citibank came out and said, hey, if you don't get it, I'm sorry, you're fired. So it's up to the individual employer, and many are, and because Biden comes out and says, they say these things like, you better do this, Mr. Employer. And so the employer's there sitting there thinking like, what happens if the weight of the federal government comes down on me? It's like what the president said this week about disinformation. Hey, you internet companies, you better do a better job. Subtext, if not, we're coming after you. So they took One American News off of DirecTV, took it off their network, One American News. This is troubling. So here's the narrative, part of the narrative. And I said, this is the celebration of Soleimani, who was killed 2 years ago this week. And of course, here he is standing in front of the wall. I think you need to zoom out on that one. If you could zoom out on that slide. There you go. You see the imagery that Iran's using in their propaganda camp? So because people think, oh, Soleimani was for Palestine. And of course, there he is with a picture of him at the Temple Mount. Seth Frantzman has a wonderful article in the Jerusalem Post on Friday talking about how Soleimani was running around the Middle East funding Hamas everywhere. I even saw a video. It looks like Soleimani in a Hamas tunnel in Gaza. It looks just like him. Now, I don't know if it is him or not, but that's what this narrative is. And so they took over the Jerusalem Post website, and they put up this picture of that explosion down there. I'll show you the whole video in just a moment, is the Dimona nuclear reactor in Israel. And you see the missile, and the missile is coming out of Soleimani's ring. That was essentially what they used to identify the body after the rocket attack outside the Baghdad airport 2 years ago. But you see the imagery that they're using? And again, this is, we used to use slingshots, now we're coming after you with power. And here's part of the video. This is the Dimona reactor in the Negev. These are some of the rockets that you'll see in this video. It's called the Great Prophet Exercise 17. Here's their drone away. This is where I get the drone arrangers from. These are drones that they shoot off. You'll see this, I think, in the video. And here's other missiles that you see the drones flying out there, other missiles that they have. And then here's the video that Iranian television, I think it was Tansim News, put up about the Great Prophet 17 exercise. Oh, there it is. That's Demona. Fly to Demona. I mean, it's nice that they do this so people know how to develop defenses for it. There's the Demona reactor. Drone hitting it. And then, of course, you'll see the missile coming in. It'll explode first, and then the missile hits it. Maybe they got their editing mixed up, but... Now, what kind of message do you think they're sending by this? Well, they're sending a message is, we're going to destroy this baby, your nuclear reactor. The other thing that they've done, and this is a long article in Tansen News, and I think Seth Frantzman also did a good analysis of this in Jerusalem Post, is that what they're doing is, you see how the path of the rocket is kind of squiggly? Misleading maneuvers, they called it. In other words, they're trying to develop these hypersonic missiles that can shift and change direction, which makes it very difficult. And this is Iran that's talking about this. The development of maneuverable ballistic warheads in the final phase causes the enemy system to have difficulty in predicting the route by leaving the warhead out of the conventional orbit. And they have all these graphs and charts and everything that they've done. And this is Seth's article. Iran looks to maneuvering missiles to evade defenses. You can find that about a week and a half ago in the Jerusalem Post. Editorial from Arab News, Iran's war machine pursues military supremacy. Another article, this is from a couple weeks ago in the Los Angeles Times. Front page, in a once fertile Iraq, a way of life drives up. What's going on? Well, they say climate change and politics. So they're always going to blame climate change. But what happens is the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that run into Iraq, are the water that flows into Iraq and Syria is controlled by who? Turkey. What's Turkey been doing? Building big dams, filling those dams up, using the dams as a defensive weapon. And one person in Turkish government years ago was heard to say, hey, you Arabs, go ahead, drink your oil if you want. We got water. Now, do you want to make a deal on the oil? And so this whole thing, Turkey's dam building spree continues at steep ecological costs, and a way of life is just completely drying up. I've been talking about this for quite a while. So it's causing drought problems to be exacerbated. Article from DW and also BBC. This is from a few years back. Last year, how water shortages are brewing wars. So this is another thing. This is a Iranian guy, and he's saying something against Israel. Nasrallah also came out speaking against Israel. So did Raisi. Talk about this. This is that's crypto mining. Never mind. This is, by the way, I mentioned crypto mining. That's a crypto mining server farm. It's going to take some electricity to run that, and it's chewing up a lot of resources. Let's see here. Okay, I'll talk about this quickly, and then I think we'll finish up with this. And I'll try to follow up with a midweek update, but I'll tell you, it's just getting harder and harder. Hang on, I have a bunch of, okay, so Ukraine and Russia. This is a situation that needs to be watching because there could be a major war. Russia's supposedly moving more troops in. This is a report. This is what Russia proposed back in December. They said to NATO, hey, NATO and U.S., here's the proposal to the U.S. The United States of America shall not establish military bases in the territory of the states of the former Union of USSR, Soviet Union, that are not members of the North Atlantic Treaty. Another thing that says the parties shall refrain from flying heavy bombers equipped for nuclear or non-nuclear armaments or deploying surface warships of any type in certain areas. This is Russia's proposal. It sounds like they've adopted the Iranian method of negotiations, and they also put out a similar proposal to NATO. These things came out in December. They had talks in Geneva. The talks have broken down. They're supposedly still talking. This is a graphic, I think, from last Sunday's New York Times about where Russia has deployed troops. Here's what it looks along the border of Ukraine. Here, this is another Russian military encampment. You can see that all these articles, they're putting weaponry near this. And then we had the thing that happened in Kazakhstan. And in Kazakhstan, they had this attempted revolution riots. Russia says it was caused by Western agents. The West, the United States denies it. But what Russia did was they sent some of their military in there and they kind of cleaned the problem up in a couple days and then left. Because Kazakhstan is very important to not only Russia but also to China with regard to the Silk Road. And so they've gone back and forth. Part of this relates to Nord Stream 2, which is transiting Russia gas to Germany. Gas prices have gone way up. There have been times when the gas pipelines from Russia have flowed back towards Russia as Russia tries to use a little bit of economic warfare. Here's another picture of, so that's Nord Stream 1 and 2 there. This is, this is the Turk Stream across the Black Sea, which is also a Russian pipeline thing, where it's going to like the former Yugoslavia, Serbia, Bosnia, that type of thing. And Nord Stream, this Nord Stream thing is a massive investment. This is just sort of a graphic that Nord Stream issued a few years back about how they were constructing that. I mean, this is in cold waters in the north and open oceans. This graphic from the Financial Times this week about Putin's playing chess, maybe we're playing checkers. Putin says, okay, look, I don't like your missiles near Russia, so I'm talking to Cuba now. So now here we go with the old Cuban Missile Crisis all again. Great article in Wall Street Journal yesterday about the Putin puzzle. Why Ukraine, why now? If you want to take some time, go to the Institute for the Study of War, understandingwar.org, and you can download some of the great PDF analyses that they've done on Russia and Ukraine. The first part, they talk about why is Putin doing this? And it says this: Putin and his advisors rely on an asymmetric approach to achieving their objectives that focuses on creating conditions within the information spaces of target states. So in other words, everything is asymmetrical warfare now. It's weapons, drones, which are much cheaper than aircraft, and you don't have to worry about, the health, religious, or other status of an airline of a pilot for the thing. You just run it from a bunker someplace. And so so understanding war has some great things. They updated it just this week. They say, hey, we got a few updates to our big multi-page report. So I downloaded and I thought, well, I'll start reading this. And it's like a phone book. And everything in yellow is stuff they've updated over the last couple days. So there are Russian troops now. They're even along the border of Belarus. And this is showing the NATO troop numbers in the region in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Look at that. 987 in Estonia, 1,175 in Latvia, at least this was as of this being done a couple weeks ago, 1,114 in Poland. I mean, so this could get out of hand very quickly, and Putin doesn't seem to be backing down. And they went in and they helped Kazakhstan because Kazakhstan is important to Russia. The Belt Road Initiative goes through Kazakhstan. The world's largest inland port is there in Korgos on the Chinese-Kazakhstan border, as they have to shift from the railroad gauge down to, I can't remember if it's a wider gauge they have to move everything to. So they have the largest inland port in the world there. It's part of Belt and Road. Now they're doing Belt and Road in Central America. And Russia has a problem. I will just say this. So sometimes Russia's right. Russia came out and said, hey, U.S., you go into Iraq and you take out Saddam Hussein. We don't like him. He's a tyrant. He's awful. But what fills his place when he's gone? Well, what have we had for 20 years now almost? We've had major problems. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better. Putin himself has an Islamic problem because Islamic families are producing way above what Russians are. It's shifting the population demographic. Turkey could lose out big in all this. It's a major problem. I do want to talk about one more thing. So here's Haftar. He's one of the dictators that's trying to control Libya. He spent a couple hours at Ben Gurion Airport. Well, at least his plane did yesterday. Why's that? He's a presidential candidate in Libya. Why is he coming to Israel? And then there's this. This is this front page of the Jerusalem Post today. Netanyahu likely to agree to Mandelblit Blitz plea deal. What he do in the plea deal is he'll plead to a couple of charges, no jail time, he'll pay a big fine, but he has to withdraw from politics. And so some people are very happy about that. I mean, Netanyahu's been around for a long time. He's burned a lot of bridges. This is an editorial from Gideon Levy in the Haaretz, a left-wing newspaper, and he's just saying, listen, this whole thing, the goal has been to get rid of Netanyahu. And as Caroline Glick said in her podcast a couple of weeks ago and this week, the charges, I'm an attorney, I've looked at them as much as I can. They seem to be trumped up charges. Therefore, things that are not really prosecuted as crimes might not even be a crime. But part of the problem is the Israeli legal community has been able to get control of the courts, the prosecutors, and I'm just telling you, said it many times, the thing you should fear most in the American system is a rogue prosecutor. Because they can make your life, they can ruin your life. And I've seen it happen many times, even with people that are not guilty. So here's an article in Israel Hayom about Netanyahu maybe resigning. Let's see if any of this can wait. Oh, well, if you want, so here's a couple, here's something. China and Tehran are implementing their agreement that they reached. And the Iranian foreign minister is going to Russia this week for meetings. And at the same time, things aren't going real well for Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the UK. He had some parties. One of the parties he had at 10 Downing Street was on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. And people are mad. I mean, everybody's mad at Boris Johnson. I don't know that his government survives. Well, that's another that's like another political earthquake. It's happening all over. I mean, we live at a time of great instability. Here is an editorial cartoon from today's Times of London. In this one article, here you see Prime Minister Johnson's wife, and the caption above says, Prime Minister, leave and take your husband with you. The Prime Minister should quit and take her husband with her. And then this editorial cartoon, and I'll close with this comment. I do not know. My suspicion is that Prime Minister Boris Johnson, given his propensity to enjoy parties, said that, well, at least he's looking forward to his going away party. So a lot of instability in the world, folks. War, rumors of war, economic supply chain. You heard it all. I mean, you didn't even hear all of it today, but there's a lot of things going on. So listen, we know that this is a time of great instability. I will also say, though, I have to confess to you, I'm not that nervous about it because I have hope. I know where I'm going to end up. You know? I know if I get sick. My sister, a few years ago, almost 4 years ago now, she had a heart attack and died. And so she's with the Lord. That was kind of hard. I mean, I'm sad, but she sees. I've seen a lot of Christian leaders dying from various causes, including this COVID. But, you know, in some way, they're getting blessed by the Lord. So listen, what's the old saying we talk about all the time from 1 Corinthians? Be strong in the faith, stand firm in the faith, act like men. Share the gospel with those around you. Let them know what's happening. Because I think secular people are looking around there saying, what is going on? And I think we have the answer. So let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your word. We pray that you will empower us with your Holy Spirit to stand firm in the faith and act like men and to put on the whole armor of God so that we can be able to withstand the wiles of the devil in this time that we live. Give us strength, give us wisdom, give us strength and power. In Jesus' name, amen.